Have any of you wondered what is going on with these vaccines today? What is happening? I've had the pleasure of being in 3 clinical trials over the past 3 years or 4 years. And I'm going to talk to you basically about what a clinical trial is and how it goes from being an idea to getting in your arm. And this is under normal conditions, and I'll cover special conditions at the end of this. Normally, a clinical trial has many uses. They help us improve healthcare by giving us new drugs, new diagnostic tools, clinical procedures, and all the tools and drugs we have today are thanks to participants in clinical trials. Everything we have today. Clinical trials have eligibility criteria. Everyone I've been in has eligibility criteria. You have to have certain medical conditions. This particular slide has cancer, pancreatic cancer people. That's the only one they want to do. You have to have gender sometimes in trials, other specific conditions that they're checking. Now, this particular trial that they were doing for cancer people is the strongest study design. It's called a double-blinded randomized controlled clinical trial. What? 2 people up in the corner are the patient and the clinician, and neither one of them knows what the drug is. The single-blinded one, the clinician knows, but the volunteer doesn't. A strongest study also takes all the database, puts it in a computer, and randomly generates the name. So there can be no bias whatsoever. Now, this particular study that we're looking at for pancreatic cancer had a standard drug, and they wanted to find out if this additional drug would help it out. So the control group would get the standard drug and the new drug, and the other group will get the standard drug and the placebo. And so that whole long list there, the double-blinded randomized controlled clinical trial, that's what that means. That's the best study you can have. Studies go through phases, and you may have seen the news lately. I don't know how you could miss it, where they're talking about, oh, it just finished stage 3. There's actually 5 stages. One of them is animal trials. The next stage is phase 1. Now, I want to point out right here that if a trial stops at any point along this line, that's where it ends. It doesn't keep going. It doesn't roll on. It doesn't go any further till they find out what the problem was. So phase 1 trial is basically a small group of people. It may only be 10 to 100 individuals that have a particular condition they're looking for. And they're basically looking to see what a good dosage and the side effects of this particular drug are. This particular study could take several months, and 70% of the drugs that get into the study, only 70% make it to phase 2. Now, phase 2, they really go more on dosage, the efficacy, and the big deal is the side effects. They want to make sure that there are no side effects that are harmful. Now, this part of the study could be up to several hundred people. And we're looking at this time of the study is several months to 2 years. And this is all to get the purpose of getting the correct dosage and finding out how it affects people. At this point, only 33% of the drugs that started this study are now at this stage. Stage 3 is when I jumped in, and that's where you have 300 to 3,000 participants who have the disease or who you want to test. The study length is 1 to 4 years. The purpose is the efficacy and monitoring of adverse reactions, and only about 25% of the drugs that had started the trials make it to this stage. As I said, I started in at phase 3 on the 3 studies I was doing. And the first 2 weeks of the study, every morning I would get up and the first thing I would do is take my temperature. And there was a whole list of side effects and things that could involve that you were supposed to note down. So the first 2 weeks are the most critical when you start a new treatment. And I did a treatment for RSV for adults. I did one on anthrax dosage for adults, not to get anthrax, but an anthrax vaccine for adults. And the third one I did was a pneumonia vaccine. And once it gets through the stage 3 and is approved, now those people standing behind there, that's the review board. And the review board goes over all the study. And they want to make sure that it's effective before they release it, that it's optimal to use and it's good for people and it's not going to hurt them. This is the place where I did my clinical trials. And on their website, it says safety above all else. I had to carry a card with me that said I was in a research study. If I went in the hospital for anything, or changed my medications, I had to let them know because these things affect the trials. Clinical Research Associates has been around a long time. They do pay for their studies, by the way. But the thing I have to tell you right now is every time frame I gave you to this point was under the normal conditions. In March of last year, they cracked the DNA code for COVID. And drug companies started immediately. So they cracked the code in March. In June, there were 83 possible drugs in the pipeline. 83. And they went on to phase 1 and then phase 2. But you might be saying to yourself, Bert, these new drugs that they came out with, they just did these in a matter of 6 to 8 months. How did they do that? How they did it was the fact that in all the trials previously I mentioned, 80% of the trials got held up because they didn't have enough volunteers. The first one that they came through with had 28,000 volunteers. The second company had 30,000 volunteers. Johnson & Johnson is working on one that has 60,000 volunteers. So they're getting the people into these studies to find the adverse effects. And any single medication you take, I don't care what it is, it's going to affect somebody somehow. And that's the way it is. So my question becomes to you, if you had the chance to do the trial or take the medication, would you do it? I know I would. You going to join me?